Okay, welcome everybody to this screencast. We're going to be doing a video here on the question of can you start a new company file and what will happen? What will happen to your QuickBooks Desktop sync? So obviously this video is related only to users of QuickBooks Desktop. If you're using QuickBooks Online, this doesn't apply to you, so you might as well turn off the video right now. But the question comes up a lot, especially at the end of the year or right at the beginning of the year. What happens if I decide to create a new company file? What if I decide I want to truncate my data? I want to do the condensed data. Like, how is this going to affect the portal and the sync? Like, is everything going to stay intact? And it's a very good question because depending on how you do it, it will be successful, and then it could be a real disaster if you do it incorrectly. So that's why this is an important video to do, especially the timing right now at the beginning of the year. So let's dig into that. Let's take a look at what are the things to be careful of and what we got to look out for. So here we are. I'm in a sample or kind of an example file here that I use for testing, and let's go over real quick. Let's look at what's available here. So if you go to the Utilities menu, and this is Enterprise Edition. I believe in the Pro and Premier, there's a similar, I think there's one or two things on here that might not be there, but the one that comes up a lot is that I have to address is if you use this export, and there's also import, because you'll say, hey, what if I can see on the import menu that I can import IIF files and I can also export. So why don't I just create a new company file? I'll do an export of all my lists, create a new company file, and then what? I'm good, right? I've got everything there. And the answer to that is no, it will not work. It will work locally, like you'll have a new file and everything. But here's the problem: when you do an export to IIF files for your various lists and things like that, it will basically export out a text file, and there's a header. It almost looks like just your standard tab delimited file, or comma delimited file. And on the top there's the headers for each column. Well, there's no column for the record ID. So when you do an export of IIF files, you don't retain any record IDs. You just get names, lists. They do not tie into other things at all. So not only will you lose like any links to like between invoices and customers, but also payments and invoices. So it's not a great tool, in my opinion, for moving the data around. It won't maintain the data integrity, that's for sure. So I would just say, unless there's another reason why you would use that tool, maybe a third-party app needs the data, it's not going to work well for you, at least in the context of GoToMyAccounts in your portal. And moving, opening a new company file, it's going to mess up everything. So what you want to do instead is you're going to use this condense data option. So how does it work? Well, you basically go in here, and right off the bat you can see it's asking you like how do you want to condense. The first option, all it does is remove audit trail info, and you could probably run this whenever you feel like it, and it wouldn't really hurt anything. It's not removing transactions, so just removing a little bit of information, metadata, whatever you want to call it. So in most cases, it's not going to be enough. It's not really what you're probably trying to achieve. Most people are trying to achieve a smaller file size, or they want to make sure that nobody can touch data from a certain amount of time back is just gone out of the file. In most cases, it's just to reduce your file size so that the company file opens up easier. It's easier to back up. It's not it's faster for the users, things like that. Let's choose this option, the one that I believe most people will use. And then the first thing it wants to know is what transactions do you want to move? Now keep in mind, this method of condensing the data does not, at least by default I should say, although it kind of does, you don't have to remove the lists. Okay, so like your customers, your accounts, your vendors, all that stuff. The idea, especially if you're using a GoToMyAccounts portal, is to keep all those. You don't want those going away. You don't want the IDs for all of your entities, your lists, to go away, because those lists exist in the portal, and there's probably a lot of transactions linked to the name, to the customer, to the vendor, to the payment method ID and all that kind of thing. You don't want to lose the referential integrity on that. So let me show you what I would recommend, and I'm hoping this is going to be a good use case for you. Let's say that you want to keep like a year's worth of data in your portal, or say 2 years at the most, but 1 year. So at the end of each year, you're not going to archive like the previous year. Like for example, in our case, it's just 2020 now. We're not going to remove all of 2019, but we're going to probably move 2018 and anything before that. Now you can choose what schema you want to do, but let's just say, for example, that's how we're doing it. We never want to keep, each year we're going to archive off the second previous year to where we are now. So in this case, I want to remove, say, all of 2018, or everything from 2018 inclusive, and then further back. So I want to say remove transactions before January 1, 2019. That's right. And then if I click this box, I ran through this before once. If you click this box, it's going to basically run a report and tell you which transactions can't be removed, because some can't be removed because they're linked to there's an open invoice. So, or there's a payment that has been reconciled or something like that. And in those cases, you don't really want those to go away. Maybe the customer, there's an open invoice and it's in collections and they're making payments on it, something like that. And you don't want that transaction to be archived off. So by default, I believe those will stay. And if you run this report, like I said, it will show you what will remain if you run it. It does like kind of a mock walkthrough. All right, so let's just move forward though. The other options are all transactions. It will remove everything and it will only leave your lists, right? And your preferences, which is not a bad thing. It's just that you're going to lose everything. It's all going to be gone. So let's see and then you can do this one, which is a range of dates. So depending on what you want to do, it's up to you. But I kind of think most people will go with the first option. Okay, let's see here. Now, when you're removing all this detail, these transaction data, pieces of data, most cases you want to maintain though things like balances, not balances, but like a summary of, say, sales or even expenses. So what it will do here is when removing the data, the transactions that match, you can optionally tell it to insert a journal entry for the whole chunk of data, or I think the better case is to do it by month. So for each month, it creates a journal entry that summarizes the data that was archived. That way, if you run reports, it may not show you all the underlying data, but it summarizes the data, so you can still see totals. So it's a good thing. It's a nice feature that they do there. So I would go with the default. I would just say they recommend one summary. I'd go with each month, just so that you can still break down reports month to month if you want to compare previous years and previous periods. That's a nice thing to have. So let's go with that one, but you can always do the first one too. It wouldn't really hurt anything. Not creating any summary, I don't know if I would do that, but it's there as an option. How should inventory be condensed? Well, we don't do inventory in the portal, so I would just say I'll leave that up to you. Whatever works for your use case is fine. I'm going to leave it set on the recommended. And then last, do you want to remove the following transactions? Some of these, I guess, it depends on what you're trying, how much you're trying to reduce your size and all that, and what information is important. I'm going to just leave them all turned on for the sake of this demo, this walkthrough. But most of these don't really affect the portal. Like, we don't really use the to be printed flag or even the sent flag. We have our own flags that are set independently inside the portal. So it doesn't really matter if you do stuff based on these fields, up to you. So we'll leave it the defaults there. Now this one is the important one. This is the one where you could really kind of screw things up. So it's saying, do you want to remove unused list entries? And they're recommending that you do, and I'm going to recommend that you don't. So here's why. If you were not using like GoToMyAccounts, maybe it's okay. Maybe it makes sense to remove them. But basically what it's saying is if there's no more invoices, like if there's no invoices anymore, if I remove all of these transactions, then what do you need the customer for anymore? And it will remove it. It will be gone. And I don't think that's what you want to do. Definitely for the sake of your portal and the referential integrity back to the customer ID, the customer ID will then be gone. So you don't want to remove these. I don't think you want to remove any of these, not the vendors, none of these. I would leave all of these, leave them be. And it's not a big deal because these lists in most cases is not really where all your space is being eaten up. And if they are, if you do have orphaned accounts or customers that you know you're not going to use anymore, then that would maybe be the exception. I would leave them in there, and then when you're done with this condensed data process, then just go ahead and remove it manually. But that way you keep all the rest of them. I just wouldn't do it. I don't see a reason to delete the customer record unless you were required to or something like that. So I'm going to select none. Just to be safe and not be losing those records, because if the customer record is revived, you decide to bring it back, like you add it back manually, now you're going to have two of that same record in the portal database, because the old record may likely still be in there, especially if we did if we set the archive flag on our end. And it might not hurt anything. I mean, it's just it might show up twice in lists and things like that. So I just don't think it makes sense to remove these. All right, so that's it. At this point, you would click the begin condense. I'll just run through it. It takes a while to run. It's going to basically go off and do its thing now. But once it's done, I'm not going to open it up again because I have most of the test data in here are for invoices where they were paid, but the payment funds are just sitting in undeposited funds. Like I never deposited it back to. I didn't do a reconciliation. I didn't deposit the funds back into, say, some checking account. So for that reason, those will stay. So I didn't want to open that up and then kind of confuse you, because you'll be wondering well, what happened? Why is everything still there? And the reason why it's still there is because if you don't move the money, if you don't deposit the money into a bank account, it's still like an unreconciled transaction pending, okay, the payment. And then if the payment's pending on an invoice, the invoice has to stay. See what I'm saying? So anyway, I don't want to confuse you on that. So anyway, it makes a copy of the original file. So if you need to get back to that or open it again, it is there. And then that's it. That's basically that's the process. That's the one you want to follow. Now, if you're going to do this and you keep more than 1 year of data, or you keep data in your portal longer than what you're about to remove, you're going to delete, then what I would suggest is this. I wouldn't even suggest it. I'd say do this thing before you run the first sync. After running all this, let us know that you did a data condense, and what was the date range, because what we can do on our end, just to be sure that your data doesn't get removed, is we can set an archive flag on it. And what that does is we set an archive flag and we tag it. We might say data frozen as of such and such date, and that will make it so that even if the sync, if you run QB Desktop sync and it sends up to the sync server and says, oh, these records were deleted, because quite frankly, I'm not sure what happens. Like when we remove these transactions from the company file, I'm assuming that it marks them as, that it will be seen as a delete. And if it's seen as a delete, well, the sync server is going to remove them. It's going to say, oh, they're deleted now, so we don't need them here in the portal anymore. But if you are hoping to keep the historical record in the portal at least, which you totally can, you just got to let us know, because we will set the archive flag on those to make sure they don't get deleted no matter what. That's the whole purpose of that feature. Now, I'm going to be adding that in there into the UI that you can use on in your portal, like in the settings. I'm just saying that for right now for this video, because I don't know how long, but it's going to be really soon, because that's actually a very critical feature to have. You need to be able to set the archive flag to be sure that it doesn't delete them, because if you do decide to truncate your file, but you want to keep the records in the portal, we have to set that. Otherwise, the sync is going to delete it and they're going to be gone. There's not going to be any much we can do about it at that point. So kind of an important thing. For now, just let us know if when that gets updated. I'm going to change this. I'll make a new tutorial for this, and I will basically instruct you to do that step. First, archive. Set your archive flag, so anything older than this date, don't delete it no matter what, and then that will protect your records so that when you do delete and you run your sync, it won't remove them unless you don't care and you want to let them go. So just keep that in mind, and you'll be fine. So if you have any issues, you have more questions about it, you can ask that in the comments on this video, or just open up a chat with us and we'll go over it with you and help you out.